If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we continue the Law by Night How to Vampire series, a mini-series that aims to improve the role-playing of players and storytellers during tabletop sessions. This episode will focus on portraying elders in Vampire the Masquerade. Vampire the Masquerade is a tabletop role-playing game whose themes could easily be summarized with two words: hope and fear. Hope that you can survive the next night, hope that you do not become a monster by succumbing to the beast, and hope that your footprint on your own incarnation of the world of darkness is memorable. The element of fear is the inverse of these things, and there are many ways for a vampire to lose everything. Their biggest enemies are, of course, other vampires, the most powerful of which players and storytellers are most likely to incorporate and interact with are elders, who are usually kindred, who are between 200 and 600 years of age. I say usually, for a 15-year-old Generation 7 vampire would be an elder by status alone. Elders are the vampires that run the world of darkness, from a vampire's perspective anyway. They have the most political and supernatural power, having both age and experience on their side. Whether you are a Camarilla, Anak, or Sabbat vampire, you will meet at least one on your own sect and others, so it is vital that the weight I speak of is portrayed in such a manner that not only do players fear these characters, but also fear everything they do. There are many ways of doing this, but you are not here for anyone's opinion, you came here for mine, and that is what I intend to do, to deliver my opinion, in the hope that some of what I may say will be able to enhance your sessions. Also, all thoughts and opinions are my own, so if you disagree with something I have said, that is totally fine. It does not mean you are right and I am wrong and vice versa. I will begin by repeating something I said in the previous episode of this series, which was how to make awesome and believable characters. I suggest you listen to that before you carry on listening to this episode. Research is imperative. I cannot stress this enough. Know when and where they were embraced, for that will dictate a lot of their mindsets and attitudes to life. Sure, they may suppress a lot of this as they age, or just stop caring about all their former mortal quarrels, but no person just exists within a void. A neonate, the generational vampiric title most players assume, are living a life. Ancilla, those who are about 100 and 200 years old, have lived 2 or 3. They have made many friends and enemies, some of which swapping roles. Elders have lived far more than this, and have seen far more of the world around them evolve. If we're going to use the US, the United States, as an example, we all know that the state of that country was incredibly different when the white man slaughtered the Native Americans at the country's humble beginnings. But as I explained in the previous episode of this series, no one expects you to conjure a whole essay on all 5 past lives of that one elder, but I would personally expect for the ST to have enough knowledge about the elder's previous lifestyles to hold a basic conversation, just to make the elder more believable. We all know there is going to be that one player who will ask every question possible to find out everything about that elder, so it is best to prepare something, rather than make the powerful elder forgettable. And with the internet available to us in an instance, there is really no excuse to find out the time period they came from. For example, let us say I am making a British Hakata seneschal who was embraced in 1242. Just by typing in 13th century England into Google, I am presented with so many websites and YouTube links about the life in the 1200s. There is a lot to digest. Clothes, items that could act as inanimate touchstones, music, possible opinions, etc, etc, etc. Once you have collected all that dank info, there is then the question of how does one portray that age in the modern night setting without coming off as a massive pompous prick. Think about your life for a moment. Think about where you were 10 or 15 years ago. Immediately, certain things pop out as highlights, both good and bad. Someone who has helped you or slighted you. All the relationships you've had, both intimate, sexual, or any friends that you have had and lost on the way. Now, plant these examples and any others that come to mind, mind and stretch it over 400 years. What would have changed the Elder for the better or for worse? What did they have to force themselves to do in order for them to survive and not be ostracized by the rest of the undead society? Or perhaps they have been. How and why did this happen? In older legacy versions of Vampire the Masquerade, for which I'm referring to V20 and before, I would encourage one to be hyper-focused on the nature and demeanor portions of your character sheet. Demeanor is the public face, whilst nature is the true self. Elders, in my opinion, are stuck in their ways of thinking things. No, that is not me saying they are racist sexual bigots. Those things have never been important to Kindred and Cainites. They have their own discriminations amongst themselves and other clans to contend with, for the most part. What I mean is that elders have their own way in which they would work. The 5 Camarilla plot is a good example of this. You're not portraying yourself, but a super old vampire. Most player characters from Legacy editions would focus more on their demeanors, only tapping into nature at dramatically appropriate moments. With elders, the nature should show up more. In V5, these systems are not there, probably due to too many people being confused with them, or rather, it is confusing in its execution rather than its existence. But I digress. In addition to everything I just included, you may wish to outline your elder motives in V5 with convictions and creating their own relationship map, perhaps thinking of 1 or 2 important figures in each century or decade as a starting point. If that is too much, think about each generation. Pick 3 things that character accomplished as a neonate, then again with an ancillor. In addition, pick 3 failures that harrow them in the modern night. When you get to Elder, think about who and what they have manipulated that no one has found out about, which justifies their power. Did they kill someone? Did they diablerize someone? Add more if needed, but don't add anything you won't easily remember. Elders care for the pillars of power found within the relationships with their childer and the greater structure of whatever sect they are in. Neonates do not really have this level of worry, because they are far too busy trying to come to terms with their existence, feeding and securing a haven that isn't going to kill them when the sun comes out, all the while avoiding death by the hunters around them. Ancillor have cracked this, but now want to get their foot in the door, to get a little lick of power. More often than not, it is not handed to them on a shiny platter. They will have to do things that will degrade their humanity, which is okay. For them at least. My point is that whilst neonates are thinking about where they're going to be in 10 years' time, an elder is planning for the next generation. Of course, this is only one type of elder. There are those who refuse to fit into that mould, most of them ending up on the red list or running to the Anarchs. McNeil, probably the most famous Anarch vampire, second only to Theo Bell, is an elder. So is Theo, now that I think about it. Now that you have some idea about their age and motives, how do you actually roleplay your complex elder? Many come from a period of history where morals are incredibly murky, shall we say. Anger and favour are weapons the elders can employ as a choice. They don't need to shout, swear, and fight their way through. They have money and influence, in addition to some wacky discipline powers if they really have to. Emotions are pleasures, and they, the elders, should secretly be pleased should someone get one over them. It's an insidious thought, which is why I believe elders' emotion should be muted. Elders would still want to blend in to the best of their ability. Now what do I mean by this? They would potentially have jobs and speak the same way as the younger kind, but it doesn't quite flow well, or they are a tad archaic in their language. They would assume attires of others that look the same age as them when they were in public, but it wouldn't quite fit or look right on them. Truth be told, it is often stated that the older you get and the lower your humanity is, you don't look so great as a person, that you actually look more vampiric, monstrous even. You give off an aura that something isn't quite right with you. Your best smile is more frightening than it is comforting. Elders are very much detached from everything else, much like how your grandma may be, but add a couple 100 years perhaps. Find something for them to attach to, the elder vampires I mean, not your grandparents, be it a fashion style or a dialect, to make them unique but not necessarily outlandish because they got to be believable in some sense. To that end, elders are often the villains in some capacity. They do not see themselves as such, of course. We see ourselves as heroes in our own tales. Pick a lover, enemy, and child that has acted as some sort of motivation, whilst keeping that stoic poker face as one of these three things reappears in some sort of capacity, either as the actual person or a look-alike, and choose how to deal with them. No one can know about this revenge, which in a macabre sense can be an act of love. Brooding and plotting creates tension, but the Elder is too darn nice or proper, and everyone knows they will snap. They just don't know when. This, to me, is terrifying. What isn't scary to me is an Elder who spams their powers like there is no tomorrow. You look at any Elder character sheet in a book or on the wiki, and you see the great number of disciplines they have accumulated over time. They should be treated like the emergency red button that sets off the nukes. Elders have child and ghouls to use those powers in their stead. At their level, if you have to use the bullshit powers constantly as poor attempts at roleplay, you have fucked up. This applies to all forms of Elder. Vampires who accumulate their power over many, many years are far more frightening than power gamers who just eat their way to the top. It is the difference between having wealth and having a dynasty. Now, this may all seem too much for you to deal with. It's bad enough trying to research the character concept of a neonate who is only 30 years of age and pushes pencils for a living, let alone the 5 separate lives for one Elder. Correct. It is, which is why I don't think players should frequently take on the role of an Elder. It can be fun to do from time to time, but Elders are only meant for storytellers to fuck over the player with. There is ultimately no wrong way of doing it, providing everyone is enjoying the work and effort you have created. If you enjoy playing the game and want to take your hobby to the next level, run a game and purchase some Vampire the Masquerade books to help you get a better understanding of the mindsets of Elders in Vampire the Masquerade, but only once you finish listening to the Lore by Night podcast, of course. Anyway, just run a game, make a little tit of yourself and do better next time. Without failure, there is no growth. With growth, there is success, so just fucking do it. To be kept updated, follow the Lore by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.